Krishna Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare Ram Ram Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare Hare
Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Janavallabha Yashodanandana Raja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Raja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Raja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Raja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam. Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna. So, by the mercy of the devotees here at the Bhaktivedanta Manor, I've been given the service to share my reflections or limited understanding of the ever-expanding realizations that can be gathered from His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada's purports on the Srimad Bhagavad Gita. Such a powerful piece of literature, and so for anyone who can join me, thank you so much for the people joining online, and also for the pujaris who are actually practically practicing what the Bhagavad Gita speaks on in these verses by serving the Lord directly. So the verse we're going to be looking at is text 53. It's an interesting verse. Actually, these verses are quite powerful. From earlier texts, Krishna is answering is giving a convincing argument to Arjuna of why it's very much beneficial for Arjuna to carry out Buddhi Yoga. Krishna is very intelligent. He explains that there's different types of yogas and different ways of achieving perfection. And so, hinting towards devotional service as the best out of all these variegated options, he kind of tries to convince Arjuna so intelligently why Buddhi Yoga, Nishkam Karma Yoga, and ultimately Bhakti, which Prabhupada decides to put all in the same category, is the best for Arjuna to practice and to follow whilst he performs his inevitable duty of fighting. So we'll go through the verse, text 53. As I'm by myself, I will read the Sanskrit, immediately jump to the translation and the purport, and then we will get started. So the Sanskrit goes like this. Shruti vipratipanate yadastasyati nischala samadha vachala buddhis tada yogam avapsyasi. Shruti vipratipanate yadastasyati nischala samadha vachala buddhis tada yogam avapsyasi. Shruti vipratipanate yadastasyati nischala samadha vachala buddhis tada yogam avapsyasi. Translation. When your mind is no longer disturbed by the flowery language of the Vedas, and when it remains fixed in the trance of self-realization, then you will have attained the divine consciousness. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. To say that one is in samadhi is to say that one has fully realized Krishna consciousness. That is, one in full samadhi has realized Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. The highest perfection of self-realization is to understand that one is eternally the servitor of Krishna and that one's only business is to discharge one's duties in Krishna consciousness. A Krishna conscious person or unflinching devotee of the Lord should not be disturbed by the flowery language of the Vedas, nor be engaged in fruitive activities for promotion to the heavenly kingdom. In Krishna consciousness, one comes directly into communion with Krishna, and thus all directions from Krishna may be understood in that transcendental state. One is sure to achieve results by such activities and attain conclusive knowledge. One has only to carry out the orders of Krishna or his representative, the spiritual master. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna. So, I'll repeat the translation one more time, then we can kind of get into this interesting breakdown that we have. When your mind is no longer disturbed by the flowery language of the Vedas, and when it remains fixed in the trance of self-realization, then you will have attained the divine consciousness. Krishna is basically trying to tell Arjuna to not be too enticed or dragged, to not even be enticed at all or attracted to the flowery language of the Vedas. It is in the previous verse, text 252, where Krishna describes the Vedas as a dense forest of delusion. Why? When we look at the Vedas and we can kind of break it down, the Vedas gives like two main aspects. The first one, which is the one we're fortunate enough to be following, is the Veda itself, revealed scriptures, Shabda Brahman, where we get to understand the actual imports of the Vedas as a path to liberation. What does that highlight? It highlights the difference between the body of the soul and the goal of life, which is to engage in devotional service towards Krishna, that being our only successful circumstance. So this section of the Vedas is giving us Gyan Kanda, Upasana Kanda, which is talking about mainly devotional service, bhakti, from the Upanishads, etc. Where actually the Gita really can come from, because the Gita is also described to be part of this part of the Vedas as a Gita Upanishad. So that's one aspect of the Vedas. So which aspect is Krishna really talking about as the dense forest of delusion? He's talking about the Karma Kanda section of the Vedas, which is what we could call the part 2, part of the Vedas. The Karma Kanda section of the Vedas focuses on two main things: fruitive benefits and avoiding material pains. This is what it's most centered around. Avoiding material pains and fruitive benefits that can be derived from your activities whilst you exist. But what's the resultant factor of this? The result is the birth and death cycle, which becomes guaranteed, which only for individuals who understand, okay, I've been through this time and time again, I do not want to be through this anymore, will seek to look at the first section of the Vedas, the Shabda Brahman section of the Vedas, which kind of explains the bandhan, explains the situation as the jiva, explains the material world, explains how we have been entrapped here, and ultimately how to get out. And for a person who works on that successfully, they end up taking to devotional service as the only means to get rid of any karmic reactions that we have stored, be they positive or negative, and so they can be situated in purity. And then be able to perceive the spiritual and then go back to the spiritual. The Karmakandic sections are mainly focused on Bhoga and Aishvarya, and Krishna actually talks about this in 244. So I'll just jump into 244 real quickly. And in 244, Krishna explains, in the minds of those who are too attached to sense enjoyment and material opulence, Bhoga Aishvarya Prasaktanam Tayaparhita Chetasam Vyavasayatmika Buddhi Samado Navidiyate. The resolute determination for devotional service to Krishna really doesn't take place. It doesn't carry on. So basically from 244, Krishna is already saying that for one who really focuses on the Karmakandic section of the Vedas, they will not be able to develop or breed devotional service to the Supreme Lord. They can breed some positive circumstances that allow them to have the perceptibility to think about Krishna eventually, i.e. the yogic ladder. But from that section itself, they can't be able to understand devotional service and to actually understand their position, which the Shabda Brahman section of the Vedas gives holistically. Bhoga and Aishvarya becomes their main thing, and it's quite attractive. You're getting opulence and you're getting to enjoy materially, and you're not putting yourself in a circumstance where bad things materially are happening to you. But the bad thing that's happening to you is that you're breeding attachment to these activities, and so that bandhan is becoming very strong, and so it's very difficult to get yourself out of it. seeing myself as a person trying to practice Krishna consciousness right now, I can understand that the things that I developed so much bonding for and attachment for are a real impediment to me being able to fully situate myself in devotional service, because to some way or another, my body still has the predilections of attraction towards these activities and things. And so naturally, my body's spontaneous flow and movement is leaning towards these activities, whereas my intelligence, which we're going to come into later, is trying to be pushed towards devotional service. The body is still much more geared towards this direction. And that's why when Prabhupada mentions that from an early age, from birth, the children should be engaged in devotional service, so that that bandhan with the material energy, that sneha pasya caused by material energy, does not affect this person, and they're not having to go through the difficulties that some of us are having to go through to clear these attachments, because it can be quite a challenge. Krishna actually, he implores us actually later on in text 49 to avoid the karma kandak section. And the term he uses is durena hyavaram karma. Durena means discard it at a long distance. Krishna is not even saying just avoid it, but he's saying it, discard it at a long distance. Durena. Hyavaram, abominable. And that's the same thing he's calling the dense forest of delusion. So actually, let's even jump onto that verse. So this verse is 249 to anyone who has access to the Gita. And so the verse, he says, Durena hyavaram karma, buddhi yoga dhananjaya, buddho sharanam anvicha, kripana falahetavaha. O Dhananjaya, keep all abominable activities far distant by devotional service, and in that consciousness surrender unto the Lord. Those who want to enjoy the fruits of their work are misers. So how do we understand that the abominable activities that Krishna is talking about are directly coinciding with the karmakandic section? Is because he highlights that those who want to enjoy the fruits of their work are simply misers, because they're not utilizing their vessel to actually achieve the perfection, which is devotional service. So they are misers, and they're trying to enjoy the fruits of their work, and that they can be able to do successfully from the karma kanda section. So Krishna is actually slashing anything to do with karma kanda from the get-go, which is quite amazing. So that was just an onset. So then as we go deeper into the verse, so just looking at the Sanskrit as well for the verse, I made some points based on this. The first point is Krishna is making us understand based on him using the word vipratipanate. So vipratipana means without being influenced by the fruitive results. So Krishna is saying don't be influenced by the fruitive results of the Vedas. From this we can understand one who approaches the Vedas certainly hears about the fruitive nature of it and its benefits. I remember it was one devotee who was doing Sankirtan, and he was talking about how he meets this person, and this person says, I want to be rich. And he was telling him, yes, the Bhagavad Gita will show you how to be rich. This other person is saying, I'm sad, I want to be happy. The Bhagavad Gita will show you how to be happy. So from the get-go, you're getting a positive, fruitive perception of engaging with this knowledge of the Vedas, and so you'll be naturally attracted to it. And so some people become attracted to the Gita because of this, because they know that they can get some form of perfection. And what does this do? When they read about devotional service, they become averse to devotional service because they just want to get the results. And the devotional service results, to some degree, won't come as immediately as those of karma kanda. So this leads to the point that for those who are approached by these positive, fruitive natures of the Vedas, this might influence their desire to follow devotional service. They might feel less inclined to want to read stuff to do with Krishna consciousness, because in their minds they are thinking, I want some practical enjoyment right now. And we can see it in our world today. You want a new house or a house in a different location. It's just about making a few arrangements based on your circumstance, and you can get that immediately. You want to change your job. You want to change your academic course. And if we're to look at the way the world used to be like 100 years ago, People, if you are a doctor, you are a doctor from start to finish. If you are a farmer, you are a farmer from start to finish, and you are content. But as time goes by, you become influenced by so many impetuses because the world makes you feel like you can enjoy as many different things. And so the unsteady person is trying to enjoy so many different things to the degree that they can. So obviously that's going to influence their desire to want to take up to bhakti because they're not getting from bhakti that same fruitive result that is coming materially. The second point becomes that if they become unfixed from the desires of fruitive results, then that would make it easier for them to follow Nishkam Karma Yoga. Because if they're trying to follow Nishkam Karma Yoga, then they shouldn't really be attached to the fruitive nature of their activities, because Nishkam Karma Yoga is saying that you perform your activities, you might be attached to the activity that you're performing, but you're willing to give up the fruit and give the fruit to Krishna. So Krishna is employing, and he uses the term Yada stasyati nishchala. And what does that mean? Yada means when, stasyati means remains, and then nischala, unmoved. So he remains unmoved. He's not shaken by the words of the Vedas. The attractive aspects of the Vedas, the wealth, the good children based on certain activities, those things stop becoming an attractive aspect for this personality. And if that is unattractive for them, then devotional service becomes something that they can perceive to be more positive for themselves. Hence them being more attracted to that. Then later on, it's interesting. Krishna says, Samada Vachala Buddhis. And the word buddhi means intelligence, but Prabhupada actually translates it as when your mind is no longer disturbed by the flowery language of the Vedas. But Krishna uses the word buddhi, and buddhi is intelligence. So how do we understand this? That, because Krishna didn't say Samado Achala Manas, because Manas is mind. But he says Samadav Achala Buddhis, intelligence. Why? Because if your intelligence is fixed, then Manas doesn't have any influence. And so I've also known in my personal practice of Krishna consciousness, I've been here for a short time and I'm trying to understand a few things. One thing I can guarantee in myself, personal experience, is that my mind is very much flickering and disturbing because my intelligence is not situated in Krishna consciousness. My intelligence is still trying to calculate different ways that I can benefit from every circumstance. And so my mind is always going to be flickering, trying to explore these different avenues that my intelligence is allowing. But Krishna says that above the mind is the intelligence. So if your intelligence is strongly fixed in devotional service, then your mind stops becoming a tool that's against your devotional progress and becomes a tool that's supportive of your devotional progress. So that's also an imploration from Krishna that we need to fixate our intelligence and not start making decisions not based on our mind's flickering nature and based on our intelligence. And we were having a Bhakti Shastri class, and in this Bhakti Shastri class, I got to that conclusion based on what our teacher was telling us. And they were saying, or I paraphrased it too, don't trust your mind even when your mind is right. Take shelter of authorities, Guru, Sadhu, Shastra in all circumstances. Because when your mind is wrong and you trust it, you're in the loss. But even though your mind is right and you don't trust it, but you take shelter of Guru, Sadhu and Shastra, then you're always protected. And so that also became a meditation for me that I shouldn't, because what happens is the mind tells us something that's right, and so we think, okay, my mind is trustworthy. And then later on, in its mind's chal nature, convinces us that something is right when it's actually wrong. Then we follow it as well, and then we get into some detrimental circumstances on our path of devotional service. But if we intelligently place our mind under the shelter of Guru, Sadhu, Shastra, your authorities, or the devotees around you, be the word for a translation or the Sanskrit, that if we situate our intelligence properly, then our mind really starts to support it, because our mind is only supporting our intelligence at the moment because our intelligence is not situated fully in Krishna consciousness. And so with that understanding, that is how we know that we've achieved yoga. Krishna is basically saying that one can see if he's in transcendental consciousness. How? when he's completely undisturbed by the material energy. Anything that's material is averse to him. His consciousness is never thinking about anything material. And then when I introspect on that, I see, okay, definitely my mind still thinks about, my consciousness and my being still thinks about material things. But Krishna and Prabhupada are highlighting that this person in transcendental consciousness is completely undisturbed. And so even if we read this, we can use this as a checklist. To the extent by which I am completely undisturbed by the material energy and its offerings, to that extent I am in transcendental consciousness. And so some of us can know that we're not really in transcendental consciousness. But by the mercy of the process, which Prabhupada now starts to elaborate on in the purport, will allow us to be in a position where we can be able to be situated in transcendental consciousness. The essence of Prabhupada's purport, from what I understood, it comes from the one line that he says at the end. One has only to carry out the order of Krishna or his representative, the spiritual master. So our spiritual journey has to be guided by the spiritual master. And that becomes the only way by which we can actually be fixed in consciousness. Because the spiritual master is giving us instruction that strongly affirms to us that if we have the faith, that this instruction is also coming from Krishna. And so if I follow this instruction fully, then I can be able to achieve success from my spiritual journey. So from the purport, as Prabhupada begins, he starts to highlight who is in Samadhi. And he mentions the person who is in Samadhi is full in realization of Krishna on all three aspects of Krishna, mainly Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. And so we are fortunate because of you, Srila Prabhupada, thank you very much, that you've made us get access to attempting Bhagavan realization. Why? Because if we can attain Bhagavan realization, then automatically Brahman and Paramatma are achieved. Because we are understanding Krishna as a person, then working to understand Krishna as a person makes us also understand him in his Paramatma feature, ever in each and everyone's heart and in every atom, and also his Brahman effulgence, because we're understanding him from his actual position as a Supreme Personality of Godhead. And our fortune comes because we're reading Bhagavad Gita, where he is telling us himself that he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and even proves this to Arjuna in the 11th chapter by displaying his universal form to him. Prabhupada also explains who's in Samadhi, the person who identifies that he is eternally Krishna's servitor and that his only business is to discharge duties in Krishna consciousness, aka Nishkam Karma Yoga. So I also found this very interesting, that Prabhupada is mentioning that their business is to discharge duties in Krishna consciousness. He doesn't even mention that it's discharging duties in Krishna consciousness with full detachment. So we can still be attached to the activity, and that's Nishkam Karma Yoga. We can be attached to the activity, but because we're offering all that to Krishna, that's still enough to help us to reach these realizations. But then obviously we know the perfected person is the person who is Anyabilashita Shunyam, no motivations, nothing. I just want to serve Krishna, everything for Krishna, nothing for me. And that was obviously Prabhupada's mood. Hence why we were able to have this home. And he's taking care of us so nicely, even after his body unmanifesting its pastimes, because he had this mood, everything for Krishna and nothing for me. He was able to give everything to all of us, which is amazing. The second thing that Prabhupada mentions in his purport is that Krishna consciousness is fixed. If someone is claiming to be Krishna conscious, in Krishna consciousness, the word Krishna consciousness deludes the fact that this person's mind and mood is always fixated 24/7 in Krishna. And so Prabhupada explains, shouldn't be disturbed by the Vedas nor engaged in fruitive activities. Which is also very interesting. We would think that for us to be situated in Krishna consciousness, Prabhupada would talk about sinful activities not being present. But actually, Prabhupada doesn't even put it as a consideration. Automatically, he assumes or he affirms that the person reading this Bhagavad Gita detailed is on a human platform. He's not performing sinful activities. And he's also not considering that as anything that he should be doing on his path of devotional life. So he just talks about not being disturbed by the flowery words of the Vedas or being engaged in fruitive activities. So and essentially negating any karmakandic section of the Vedas can allow us to be fixed in Krishna consciousness. Then he also talks, he's first mentioned, who's this person in Samadhi and how is his activities in Krishna consciousness? They're fixed. So then he mentions, okay, so if his activities are fixed, how does he get instructions? Prabhupada explains that he becomes directly in communion with Krishna and gets directions understandable in that transcendental state. So because he's always in a transcendental state of consciousness, then he'll be able to understand when the Lord speaks to him or directs him, because the Lord is fully transcendental. And so he'll be able to have certainty that any of his results will be achieved in this state. Because he's in transcendence, all the instructions that are coming transcendentally are coming from Krishna. Because Krishna is not material, he will guide through different avenues, which we're going to discuss, inside and outside, inside as super soul, outside as the spiritual master. But certainly, we have to be, and Prabhupada is imploring this, be fixated in a transcendental state of consciousness to be able to perceive the transcendental instructions coming from Krishna. And I remember His Grace Ananta Gopal Prabhu, I was speaking to him about like different issues, and he just looked at me and he just said, oh man, people just have to be Krishna conscious. And at first I was thinking, okay, yes, Prabhu, okay, people have to be Krishna conscious, but how can I, it's easier said than done. But then he also encouraged me to try to see everything that we do in our devotional life from a transcendental viewpoint. Looking at our activities in the temple, if you're at home, when you wake up in the morning and you take your japa mala, meditating on the fact that you're actually performing a spiritual activity, when you're reciting these mantras, having the meditation that these mantras that you're reciting are actually transcendental, being passed down from generation to generation, and you getting the good fortune to be able to access this to achieve perfection within your life is certainly most glorious. Seeing how Krishna is actually, in that sense, arranging transcendental activity to permeate through your existence gets you closer to actually being in that transcendental state of consciousness. And I probably am not the best person to have received that instruction, because I still struggle to experience this space that I'm in as a transcendental space. But with slow attempts here and there, associating with the devotees, chanting with the devotees, hearing from other devotees as they share their realizations, we begin to feel and acknowledge that we're actually in a transcendental space that's outside of this material world. And then he says that Prabhupada also highlights that up until we reach this state of consciousness, where we can be able to understand the instructions that Krishna is giving, one carries out the order of Krishna, either directly from Krishna or from his representative, the Guru. But we've just mentioned that the only way you can get it from Krishna is if you're also in an transcendental state of consciousness. Although still you can get glimpses where Krishna is giving instruction to you and you feel that actually what's happening here is really an arrangement by the Lord. And I remember I had a similar circumstance to one that was shared with one devotee was giving us class today, where I went on a program, and then when I came back I had actually refused to eat at the program because I was really wanting to eat some Mahaprasad from the temple. And so when we got back slightly late. We were being driven back from the program, and then when I arrived at the manor, it was around 9:30, and so they were closing up the temple. And then I came into the reception area where all the Mahaprasad would be displayed, hoping to get some Maha, but all I saw there was a few droplets of chutney, because obviously everyone had carried everything. And I was feeling, oh man, I really wanted some Maha, but it looks like Krishna wants me to fast. So then as I was walking back, a devotee sees me and says, oh, look, there's this plate that the pujari was made for, but he didn't take. So here you can have this plate of Maha. And so I took the plate, and after meditating on it, I understood actually Krishna really fulfilled my desire there, because I wanted to have some Mahaprasad like this. And so in one sense, we can have these glimpses that Krishna is giving us instructions. But the safest way for us to be able to do this, or to understand the instructions that are coming directly from Krishna is really through the Guru. You know, Krishna says, inside I appear to you as a super soul and outside as a spiritual master. How do we understand from the super soul? The only way we can understand things from the super soul is when we've been able to conquer our ever-flickering mind. And how Krishna explains this is samadha vachala buddhis, when our intelligence is also fixated in the transcendental practices. And so if someone is not able to do that, like myself, then my safest option at the moment is to take advantage of the Guru, the Krishna's expansion, who is coming to guide me. And you know, some of the gurus are shiksha, some of them are diksha, but Krishna uses these individual personalities to inspire us and give us the right direction by which we should trudge on in our devotional life. But the concept of guru is very much fundamental, and we can see very, very powerful examples. One is yourself, Srila Prabhupada, His Divine Grace, who took shelter of his spiritual master and was given the one instruction to preach Krishna consciousness in the Western worlds, and he took that instruction as his life and soul. And because that was his fixated mood to do this, then it was automatic that he got all success and all good fortune on his favor, because he was following the instruction given by his guru, regardless of what impediments or feelings that he had. And actually today we were shown by His Grace Ananta Gopal Prabhu in a presentation where Prabhupada is saying that, you know, I'm here in New York, in a fantastic, wonderful place, but my mind is always hankering for Vrindavan, and I just want to be in Vrindavan. But because I've gotten this instruction, I have to carry out my duty. And so his duty is fixated on the instruction given by his spiritual master, and so that's what he's following, and that's what's breeding the success. The other example we get also from Srimad Bhagavatam is Dhruva Maharaj. Dhruva Maharaj, obviously after being chastised by his stepmother, is instructed to go perform austerities by his mother, and then he goes and performs austerities, and then he gets Narad Muni. And then Narad Muni tells him to chant Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya and focus on this vibration. And so when he does that and he follows that instruction, in 6 months, the Lord appears to him personally, and by the touch of his conch shell on his head, he's able to say these wonderful prayers, still gets what he was hankering for materially, but actually gets more, the direct association of the Lord. And then he says, I was hunting for, you know, broken pieces of glass, but you give me diamonds, gems, as yourself. So that's also another nice example. So definitely it should be our impetus to search for the spiritual master, to pray for the spiritual master to guide us and instruct us, and to also take shelter of those devotees who are willingly in a mood of servitude trying to guide us as well on this path of Krishna consciousness. We're very fortunate here at Bhaktivedanta Manor that we have amazing personalities, both in the temple and outside the temple, who are very enthusiastic to want to serve others, to get them to be situated in the perfect state of devotional life. And so if we see these personalities as Krishna's representatives, giving us a nice guide of how we can be able to live our lives perfectly in Krishna consciousness, we can be situated in the buddhi, in the intelligence that will not dissuade our mind to material activities or to attract it to fruitive activities, and we can ultimately reach that samadhi stage where we're fully realizing that Krishna is the supreme and we need to serve Krishna eternally and not care about anything material, and not just know this from a philosophical perspective but also practically, where we are seeing our body, our mind and our intelligence slowly being detached from material desires. So I shall finish there. Thank you so much for those who've been able to hear, and I hope whatever I've mentioned, if it's of any use, is inspiring us to want to reach this state of samadhi, as explained by Prabhupada, which is realization of Krishna in his Brahman, Bhagavan, Paramatma and Bhagavan feature, and understand that we're actually his servants, and our business is to eternally discharge duties in Krishna consciousness. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai, Jai Nitai Gaura Premanande Hari Bol.